Okay. All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Temple Beth Sholom. I know you're going to enjoy tonight's presentation. I have a sign-up sheet for a newsletter. Ronnie, maybe you can tell a little more about what the newsletter is about, because I don't actually.
If I knew, I'd tell you. Rachel is our speaker that is going to be introduced very shortly, and she is just asked me to circulate this clipboard. There is a pen, there is a place for you to put your first, last name, and email, and you will be subscribing to the newsletter, which will keep you up to date in what's going on with her organization. So we're going to start handing it around right now, and we'll start it at this end of the room. Don, look at me. We're going to start this with you and Julie, and we'll hand it around. And then, if you haven't seen it by the end of the program, we'll have it at the front desk where you all signed in, and you'll have a chance to sign in then. Okay? So I think Rachel will be here in just a minute. Oh, there you are. I'm not introducing you, so.
Always hot to fight these things. I'd like to welcome all of you. I'm a little bit hoarse. I'm Rabbi Ed Weisberg, co-chair of our Temple Beth Sholom Education Committee. Our committee is sponsoring this event along with the local branch of the Zionist Organization of America and our regional Jewish Federation. So welcome one and all. It's been a busy day for many of us. I think this is the third function for half the audience, right? Started with breakfast, went to something else, and here we are. I'd like to also welcome back Rabbi Altshuler, who just came back from Israel. Welcome back. I know, you're almost here, right? Not off the boat, but off the plane. Gotcha. Our speaker is going to be introduced not by me, but by myself introducing the introducer to the speaker. And I refer to Jonathan Goldberg, who is at the top echelon of the British attorneys, him being a leading defense attorney in the UK. I imagine that he'll tell you a little more about our speaker. I know he's had a long association with her, as have some other people here. So without further ado, here's Jonathan.
Thank you, Rabbi Ed. So I'm not going to steal Rachel's thunder and try to tell you anything about the wonderful organization she represents, Shurat HaDin, translated as the Israel Law Center. But I'm going to introduce her in a moment personally, and I'm going to just tell you about the mission that Regina and I were on, organized by Shurat HaDin at the end of last month. And we had 7 nights in Israel. This has to be, I think, about the 6th of your missions that I've done. I've been going on them since 2010. And you couldn't have more wonderfully organized events than these. They are clockwork. They're the gold standard. The things we did, it was actually sensory overload at this terrible time. I'm going to use that hackneyed phrase, a life-changing experience. It was for both Regina and I, and the rest of the 41 participants, who were not all lawyers. I don't think even a minority were lawyers. We had doctors, we had intellectuals, we had academics, we had many Christians, which was wonderful, Christian Zionists. We had the most amazing eclectic group of people from all over the world. And the things we did, I can't even begin to tell you because there was so much and so many. But to give you just a few of the highlights, we met and talked with General Gal Hirsch, who's charged with overlooking the hostage negotiations. We met and talked with media spokesman Mark Regev and Colonel Peter Lerner. You'll have seen them on television, I'm sure. we met and talked with the rabbi in charge of gathering in the human remains from the southern towns and kibbutzim for zakah. You know, all dressed in the Haredi uniform of black from head to toe and the robes and all the rest of it. And yet he had to shoot a terrorist himself when he came on one unexpectedly as he turned a corner. We met with the young rabbi who's head of the main military mortuary. He just got the job when October the 7th occurred, and he was telling us he'd never seen a dead body before. And then on October the 7th, great big refrigerated container trucks came, and he opened the back, and forgive me, but I'm telling you, as he told us, and human remains and blood poured all over him. And it was a quick learning experience, and each one of these deceased handled by him and his team with the most amazing reverence and respect. It had to be seen to be believed. We spoke, of course, with members of the families of hostages and how brave and dignified they were, I can tell you. We were toured around Kfar Aza, the worst hit of the southern villages, by the father of a girl who was burnt alive, and yet this father was lucidly, in a dignified, calm way, taking us round, telling us what had happened. Just extraordinary. An extraordinary example of courage. We met a man who is credited with saving up to 750 kids from the music festival. He was just an ordinary farmer who'd been ferrying these kids backwards and forwards when parents would phone him and say their GPS coordinates that they've given us are here and there. And he told us of one particular experience when he came across 6 of the terrorists who were about to rape one of the young girls. And he, being from Iraq originally, speaking fluent Arabic, actually speaking no English, everything he told us had to be translated. Very ordinary guy. But he said to the terrorists, he said, "Oh, come on, give me a go. Why won't you let me have a go? You go off down the road, because I'm warning you, the Israeli army are coming, but I'm just an Israeli Arab, so leave her to me." And he saved the girl in that way. And he saved, as I say, they credit him with saving 750 others, and he's about to receive some major award from President Herzog. We toured a tank repair base on the southern border, which was commanded by a 23-year-old girl. She must have been as big as this, and yet beautiful manicure, I noticed, totally feminine, quite extraordinary. We picked lemons for the, missing kibbutzniks in the army. We made lunch for soldiers at a sort of open air, I don't know how to describe it, a kind of cafe, really, just on the Gaza border. And these young soldiers would come in with their guns, have lunch, and go back to fight. Quite extraordinary. So many experiences. It really was amazing. I wanted to say something about my previous missions, but time doesn't permit. It wouldn't be fair. I'll simply tell you one wonderful thing we did. They ran a Mossad mission. Their connections with the security and Mossad and the IDF were extraordinary. So I've done things that no ordinary Israeli has done. I've sat in an F-16 cockpit in the Ramon Air Base. I couldn't get in it anymore. That was some years ago. I've sat in a tank. I've inspected one of the missile boats, the SAR boats, at its base in Ashdod, and we were lectured by the admiral commanding the base. We've been inside Mossad headquarters in Herzliya to be lectured by spies. We've been inside Shin Bet headquarters to be lectured by one of the guys who interrogates the captured people. Most terrifying man I've ever met in my life, by the way. Remember, he had one arm and he was just so frightening. But the experiences that you have with this organization and on their missions are quite life-changing, and I'm just telling you this because they have the next one on May the 27th for a week. So should you be able to go on May the 27th, believe me, you'd be in for a view of Israel that you would never normally imagine yourselves having. So with that very brief introduction of their missions, let me say a word about Rachel May Weiser. Well, the head of the organization is a remarkable woman called Nitzana Darshan-Leitner, who always figures in any of the surveys of the 100 most influential Jewish people in the world. When Time magazine did one, I think she was ranked about 55, something like that. But Rachel is absolutely her right-hand woman and has been for many years. She's American from Pittsburgh. Her father is a famous surgeon from Pittsburgh. And she moved to Israel with her husband and children in 2010. She's a lawyer. She earned her law degrees at Case Western University and practiced for a time in Pennsylvania. And in Shurat HaDin, she runs the advocacy, the educational programs, she heads the development team, and she's in charge of fundraising. And not to put too fine a point on it, I need hardly say that an organization like this depends on raising funds, and I need hardly say that we all realize that in these terrible times, every Jew and lover of Israel has to give until it hurts. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted when I say that. So Rachel, she is, forgive me saying lastly, she is the mother of 5 children, 3 of whom have served in the IDF so far, 1 absolutely at the moment, officers, very distinguished, all of them, and she's the grandmother of, I think, just 1 at the moment. So a great friend of mine and really a remarkable person who's going to tell us all about Shurat HaDin and the amazing work they do, Rachel May Weiser.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Regina, for arranging this, and to everybody at Temple Beth Sholom and the JCC and the Federation who helped to arrange this and make this happen. I really can't tell you how much we appreciate, we Israelis, being welcomed into your communities and your interest and your love and your caring for what's happening to us. And I hope that you understand that we are equally concerned about you. We understand that what's happening is global. And Shurat HaDin, I think, in terms of that issue, is quite unique in that the work that we do is very international. So, as Jonathan said, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to law school in Cleveland, and I made Aliyah in 2010 with my family. I'm going to talk to you tonight about Shurat HaDin, what we do in general, but specifically what we've been doing since the start of the war. And I hope that it brings you some encouragement to know that there are many ways to fight this battle, and that Shurat HaDin is joining in every way that we can. On October 7th, I was in the northern part of Israel, in an Airbnb, actually, that my family rented near a city called Ma'alot. As Jonathan said, I have 5 children. When I made Aliyah, they ranged in age from 3 to 13. They're now 17 to 26. And I do have one amazing Israeli grandson, and a second one on the way any day, so I need to get back quickly. But on Simchat Torah weekend, my family hadn't been away together for a very long time, and I told my kids, I'm renting this house, it has a pool, we're all getting together for the weekend. And all my kids came. I have 2 that are married, came with their spouses, and the 3 others actually each have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and everybody came. We were quite the group. And we had such a wonderful weekend. In the morning of October 7th, at 6:30 in the morning, we are Shabbat observant, so we didn't have our phones on, but my son-in-law is in Golani. He's a commander, and he was supposed to be on Nahal Oz base. I know that all of you know that 40 or 50 soldiers were slaughtered that morning on Nahal's base. He was supposed to close Shabbat. Close Shabbat means you stay on base for Shabbat. It's an Israeli word that probably doesn't translate properly into English, but that's what everybody calls it. Last minute, his commander told him, you know what, you're newly married, why don't you go and spend Shabbat with your wife? Probably saved his life. But his soldiers, he was a commander, and his soldiers were on base that day. So at 6:30 in the morning, he got a phone call from his soldiers, and they said, they're killing them, they're shooting them, they're dying in their beds. We've run, we found a room, we're hiding. His soldiers actually were not combat soldiers, they were intelligence soldiers. My son-in-law started in Golani combat, but he injured his shoulder and became a Golani intelligence commander. His soldiers all survived October 7th. Every one of them ended up in the hospital with severe smoke inhalation damages and PTSD. My oldest son was in a Sayeret unit, a special forces unit of the Nahal brigades. He, of course, was finished, but received his Tzav Shmona, his emergency call-up, on October 7th. In the end, he didn't have to go into Gaza because he had a badly herniated disc from his training. My second son is an officer in an elite intelligence unit. By 10 a.m., he was on his base, along with his girlfriend, who was also an intelligence officer. And as I mentioned, my son-in-law. My fourth son is drafting in August, and it's pretty terrifying. He's going to be a combat paramedic, which is, again, so amazing. I am so proud of him. He wants to be a doctor, like his grandfather. And, but it's scary. We parents in Israel are living through the most horrible terror. Our friends have lost children, our children have lost friends, and it's every day and it's every week. We're at another funeral and another shiva, and there's just a heaviness in the air. But I can tell you that what exacerbates that pain and that heaviness is what the world is saying about us. The lies that they're sharing. They're calling my son, my beautiful son, who loves to read and play music and sing and play baseball and basketball and soccer and American football, is a genocidal murderer. It's really painful. And it's just not true. And somehow it doesn't matter. The world is upside down. It's like we're living in the Twilight Zone. So let me tell you about Shurat HaDin, what we do, who we are, and what we're doing to combat this issue that we're having right now, this threat to Israel's existence, which, make no mistake, is a threat to Jewish existence. Shurat HaDin started during the time of the Second Intifada over 20 years ago by a group of young lawyers who thought there's got to be something we can do using the law to fight terrorism. There are laws out there. There are laws called anti-terrorism acts that forbid anybody from providing material support and resources to terror organizations. And if you do, you're liable, you're responsible for the damages that they cause. And this young group of lawyers, one of them being Nitzana Darshan Leitner, who Jonathan mentioned, came together and started bringing lawsuits on behalf of victims of terror against the supporters of terror and the terrorists themselves. They brought lawsuits against Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They brought lawsuits against the Palestinian Authority for supporting and directing terrorism. They brought lawsuits against state sponsors of terror, Iran, Syria, North Korea. They brought lawsuits against the companies that helped the terror organizations, banks that transferred their money, oil companies that provided them fuel. And they were successful. And it got the attention of the former head of Mossad, Meir Dagan. Meir Dagan was a visionary. He was a soldier who had seen too many wars and too much bloodshed and understood that there has to be another way other than just sending our boys in to be slaughtered. And he understood that if you cut off the head of the financial snake, it actually does paralyze the snake. Can't so quickly grow that head back. The military head, very easy to grow back. But the guy who knows where all the money is, or the guy who's transferring the money in, he's the really powerful one. And Mayor Dagan started a unit that started to go out and go after and target the money trail. And he was quite successful. There's actually a book, Nitzana happened to write it, little shameless plug, but Nitzana Darshan Leitner wrote a book called Harpoon, which is about this unit, and it's really, really an interesting book. And you'll read these stories and you'll say, I remember when that happened. I remember when that person was assassinated in Dubai. It was Mossad, and it was Mayor Dagan. And Mayor Dagan reached out to Shurat HaDin and said, if I give you evidence of bank transfers to Hamas, can you use it? And we said, absolutely, we can sue the bank. And he started to share information with us. And that started 20 years of cooperation between Shurat HaDin and the Israeli government and the IDF and other security arms of Israel. And the work that we do is hand in hand, part and parcel, and part of the war against terrorism. So briefly, very briefly, what we do in general, we bring lawsuits to block terror funding. And that's what I just described to you a moment ago. We fight BDS and lawfare. Now, I have to tell you that I'm both proud but also sad to tell you that Shurat HaDin understood years ago that BDS was just one of the arms of the terror organizations. I think most of us were a little bit complacent. We didn't really see BDS as a big threat, as a real problem. And at the end of the day, I think we're now understanding that this is all part of the terror scheme. Terrorism, by definition, is committing acts of violence for the purpose of achieving and influencing some sort of political goal, some sort of government pressure. Well, how do you place that pressure? Well, if you're smart, like Iran and these terror organizations, you start 20 years ago placing professors and students on college campuses all over the United States, and they become your spokespeople. And guess what? You know why the whole world is calling for a ceasefire? Because Iran placed those people there 20 years ago, and they're doing a really good job. So we understood that BDS and lawfare was something that we needed to fight. And we, just to give you one example, we've stopped flotillas by going after the insurance companies who provided insurance to the boats, making sure that they understood that if they provide insurance to the boats that are going to sail to Gaza and bring them illegal goods, they are providing material support and resources to a terror organization. And we will sue them for any damages that occur as a result of that terror organization's terrorist acts. They pulled the insurance, the flotilla, the boats could not sail. And if you've noticed, there haven't been too many flotillas lately. We brought an action against Airbnb when they decided that they were going to delist all of the properties in Judea and Samaria. And we brought that case in the United States under the fair housing laws because they were discriminating. They only pulled the listings of Jewish owners. Christian owners and Arab owners in Judea and Samaria were permitted to list their houses on Airbnb. And after the lawsuit was filed, we very quickly got a call from their lawyers. They settled and they pulled the policy. We defend IDF soldiers against war crimes complaints. There's no shortage of those. Everybody knows they keep bringing these cases against our boys and girls, saying that they're war criminals. And by the way, there is teeth. Even though the ICC is a joke, and so is the UN, and everything is against Israel, and it's ridiculous, and it's unbelievable, and we don't understand how they can even have any credibility, at the end of the day, they do. You know, the news that's coming out across the world The one thing Israel can't effectively fight is when the UN reports something. Everybody believes them. They have this deference. Well, the International Criminal Court is the same thing, and when they bring a case and they bring criminal charges against a soldier in the IDF, guess what? That soldier can't easily go travel. And many of them have grandparents in other countries they'd like to visit. There are teeth. So we started bringing war crimes complaints against the real war criminals in the region, as many as we can. We just load them in there, because at some point the judge and the prosecutor in the International Criminal Court is going to have a real problem bringing some kind of case against Israeli soldiers if they've got this pile of really well thought out, planned, evidenced complaints that lay out the war crimes that the real war criminals are committing in the Middle East, and not just against Israelis, but against their own citizens. Using people as human shields, training children to be soldiers, these are all war crimes. We fight jihad on social media. We are the first and maybe the only legal organization to ever bring lawsuits against the social media giants, Google and Twitter and Facebook, for supporting terrorism on their platforms. Now they keep winning because there's this statute called Section 230 that gives them complete and total immunity. But mark my words, 5 years from now, that law is going to change. Because this is what Shurat HaDin is doing. We are helping the world to understand that sometimes the law doesn't apply anymore because there has been an evolution. So just like, for example, because of our lawsuits, there is no international banking in Gaza. Not one bank will open inside of Gaza because they know we'll sue them. And that hurts them. Terrorism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They need banks, or they have to carry in suitcases of cash, right? Or they have to get billions of dollars from Iran, which, you know, somehow we can't manage to stop just yet, but we'll figure a way. The same thing is going to happen with the way that terrorism is being spread on social media. Social media is no longer a platform that deserves this type of immunity. It's a living, breathing being, right? If you do a search on your Google for a vacation, do you suddenly start seeing a million ads for vacations? They know what coffee you drink. They know everything about you. And now they start introducing you to things. You search for cooking recipes, and all of a sudden you're being introduced to all these cooking groups and recipe places. Well, what happens if you're somebody who searches how to build a bomb? The algorithms work the same way. The introductions work the same way. It has to stop. Social media can no longer be a platform for fundraising, recruiting, spreading lies for terrorism. We're going to get there, and we're working on it. And the last thing that we do is Israel advocacy education. We're a small group. We've got exactly 8 people in our offices at Shurat HaDin. We accomplish a tremendous, unbelievable amount with those people, but we need an army. And so we educate. We run missions, we run conferences, we run law student internship programs, and we run a lawyer's advocacy seminar. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. Wait, I'm going backwards. Okay, so let's talk about Shurat HaDin's response to October 7th. First and foremost, within days of the war starting, we launched a legal war room. I'm hesitating because I'll tell you that we were all pretty paralyzed for a while. Our kids were being called in. My very good friend lost her son the first day of the war, October 7th. He was in the OKETS unit, the Special Forces Dog Unit. He was my son's first friend when we made Aliyah. When you move to a new city, you remember your children's first friends. When you move to a new country, those kids are your lifeline. And this boy was my son's first friend. And he was killed on October 7th, saving the life of one of his soldiers. And that funeral was the hardest funeral I've ever attended. But we understood at Shurat HaDin that we had to jump to action very quickly. There was a lot we needed to do. Everything we do, right? We fight terror in court. We just had the worst terror attack since the Holocaust against the Jewish people. We need to take action immediately. And so we decided we can't do this with our staff of 6. And by the way, sorry, we had a staff of 8 that became 6 because 2 people were called out on Miluim right away. One of them was our COO. That was really hard. And by the way, I'm not sure if any of you really understand, anybody who doesn't live in Israel, but they just disappear. Right? When a soldier's called up on Miluim, they don't like call the office and say, hey, here are the passwords to all my, accesses. Here's where I left these things. Here's what you need to finish. No, they just disappear. Imagine if that happened to you with 25% of your staff just didn't show up one morning. It's really hard. So we sent out a call to action. As I said, we do this advocacy education, so we have lists and lists of law students who worked with us, lawyers who came on our seminars, all of the people who attend our missions who either are lawyers or no lawyers, and we said, we need help. We're creating a legal war room, and within a week, we had 600 lawyers from 17 countries who volunteered to help. And we mobilized them. I will tell you that, as Jonathan said, I started off at Shurat HaDin purely as a U.S. litigator. I work on our anti-terror cases and I oversee our U.S. legal actions. But I slowly evolved, as always happens. Anybody who works in a nonprofit knows you never wear one hat. And I got involved heavily in fundraising. But when the war started, I just took off the fundraising hat. I mean, we didn't have time for that. And I put on my legal hat, and I just worked on that 100% of the time. And the running joke in the office was, who has a harder job? The chief of staff of the Israeli army, who now has to mobilize 300,000 soldiers, or Rachel, who has to mobilize 600 lawyers? It's a pretty close call, by the way. Not easy. But I managed, and we were able to set off and work on and start and finish and start again tens of projects in a matter of weeks. So what did we do? First of all, we went to our go-to at Shurat HaDin. We combated terrorism using the law by bringing lawsuits on behalf of the victims. You're looking here at a picture on the right of Eitan Ba'usi. Eitan Ba'usi is a client of Shurat HaDin's. Eitan was at the Nova Festival. Eitan was dancing like everybody else at a peace festival where hundreds of kids were just trying to have a nice, peaceful, happy, loving time. And Eitan, when he's not dancing, when he's on duty, he was a soldier in the Special Forces Duvdevan unit, and he was a medic. So when terrorists infiltrated Nova, and everybody ran away, running for their lives, Eitan ran in. And Eitan saved tens of lives before he was murdered by Hamas terrorists. His family are clients of Shurat HaDin, and we are bringing lawsuits on their behalf. Eitan Halley was also at the Nova Festival. Eitan ran into a bomb shelter. Hamas, we think of them as barbarics, but they're really smart. They shot off all these missiles, which drove all Israel into bomb shelters. That's what we do. We hear a siren, a red alert, we run to our bomb shelter. That's what Israelis do, and guess what? That trapped us all. We became, just prey. So he ran into a bomb shelter with everybody else, with all of his friends, and all of a sudden Hamas terrorists surround the bomb shelter and they start to throw grenades in. And Eitan's friend picks up every grenade they throw in and throws it out until he couldn't anymore. And the grenade started to explode inside the bomb shelter, and then the Hamas terrorists shot into it and killed all of Eitan's friends. He was shot through the leg, he was shot through the lungs, and he laid underneath the bodies of his best friends for 6 hours, pretending to be dead, until the Israeli army could come and save him. Eitan's physical injuries are nothing. He's going to live with the emotional injuries for for the rest of his life. We represent them in lawsuits against Iran. We filed a case in the United States in the DC District Circuit for providing support and material resources to Hamas. We filed lawsuits for them in Israel against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, against Hamas, against their leaders, and against the Palestinian Authority. I'm going to talk to you about the Palestinian Authority in a little bit. We're also working on lawsuits against Qatari entities. We can't sue Qatar. Qatar is not yet designated as a state sponsor of terror, though they should be. But we can sue Qatari entities. We can sue banks that transfer their money. We can sue oil companies that provide them fuel. We can sue foundations that raise money for them. We're working on that. We're working on suing South African banks. The issue of South Africa is a really big problem. I know that all of you have probably seen what they did in the ICJ. South Africa was bailed out by Iran, and they're paying Iran back. We have already sent 2 warning letters to 2 banks in South Africa to shut down accounts that are owned by Hamas with information that we received from our friends in the Israeli intelligence. And we're working on ways we may be able to sue those banks. There are Turkish entities, and there's also Binance. Hamas gets a lot of money through cryptocurrency. So these are the lawsuits that we're working on now. The one against Iran, PIJ, Hamas, Palestinian Authority have been filed already, and we're working on 3 or 4 more that will be filed soon. The Palestinian Authority, I want to talk to you for one moment because the Palestinian Authority still has this pay-for-slay program in place. I want to tell you that another thing that Shurat HaDin did, in a case actually that I tried in the Southern District of New York, it was the first case that ever went to court against the Palestinian Authority relating to 10 terror attacks during the Second Intifada, and we proved, there was a unanimous jury, that the Palestinian Authority and Arafat himself were directly involved in those terror attacks, despite what they said for all these years. And we won a $550 verdict, a $550 million verdict for the victims of those attacks. That case has been overturned by the Supreme Court on a technicality. It's a long story. I can tell you anybody who's interested about it separately. But what's critical is that, and this is why Shurat HaDin's work is so important, because we can bring a case and we can lose, but the results are still critical. Number one, we proved that the Palestinian Authority and Arafat were directly involved in the terror attacks during the Second Intifada. And number two, the pay-for-slay evidence came out of that lawsuit. That came out of our discovery, out of the hard work that we had for, God, a year fighting to get that evidence. And that evidence is now being used. It was used for a while. It created the Taylor Force Act, and the U.S. did stop funding the Palestinian Authority for a while, but they're funding them again. But what's crazy is that, and I think we all kind of need to pause for a moment to understand this, to wrap your heads around this. The October 7th terrorists who raped and burned and mutilated and murdered and tortured babies, women, men, elderly, kidnapped them into Gaza, they're going to apply for this money and they're going to get paid. They're going to get paid. It should sicken the world that the Palestinian Authority, who's claiming that they can be Israel's peace partner, who's claiming that they can take over Gaza, is paying these terrorists. So we have brought a lawsuit against the Palestinian Authority for their encouragement. I can tell you that in the lawsuit that we brought, one of the arguments that was made was that if you pay someone after the fact, there's no causation. This is a legal term. You have to prove causation. And in the closing arguments, our lead counsel said, when someone comes to paint your house, you don't pay them before, you pay them after. And that's what the Palestinian Authority is doing. So we are fighting this. We are fighting this by suing on behalf of the victims, and we are going to collect that money because Israel collects tax money for the Palestinian Authority. So we will collect against that tax money, and guess what? We're being really creative now. We used to not sue the individual terrorists, because if you sue the individual terrorists, it's like suing the mugger, right? They don't have any money. Except they do. We can garnish their wages. And so we file with the Israeli government to take money that they're supposed to be giving to the Palestinian Authority, which is going to go to these terrorists, instead to go to their victims. So we try to be very, very creative. Again, anything we can do to fight for Israel, to fight hate, to fight anti-Semitism using the law, that's what Shurat HaDin does. And I have up here, as you see, you all have seen it. You've seen the terrorist who called his mother and father so happy, so excited how many Jews he killed, and they were praising him. He's going to apply for money. And this terrorist here, who you just saw last week admit to raping Israeli women, he's going to get money too, and we have to fight that. Let's talk about Israel's women, our female warriors, not the victims, the heroes. The first picture is a picture of our Caracal battalion. These are female combat soldiers. Israel has the most progressive army in the world. All these feminists for Palestine and gays for Palestine, they have it completely backwards. You want to be on the side of Israel. We love you. We take care of you. We give you every right that you deserve. And these women are fighting for Israel. And they are beautiful, and they are, can't say it in a shul, but bad. My daughter-in-law is from Norway, and her sister is an officer in a female combat unit. October 7th, she was called in immediately. She waded down roads of dead bodies to arrive at kibbutzim because her unit's specialty is clearing terrorists out of communities. The fact that we have soldiers, that's what they have to be trained to do, and the fact that they're women, I think, is just both sad and amazing at the same time. And these women soldiers were our heroes that day. In fact, the Caracal unit fought against Gazans for 17 hours in a tank. They were the first ever female tank crew to engage in active combat in the world. The second picture I know you all recognize is Mia Shem. Mia actually was a friend of my daughter, is a friend of my daughter's. Thank God she's back in Israel, but she was taken hostage. She was operated on, fully awake, with a gun to her head, that if she made a sound, they would kill her. And we've got the last picture, who is Amit Man, who's also a client of Shurat HaDin's. Her family is. She is a paramedic. She fought for hours, saving hundreds of lives on October 7th, even after she herself was shot. She succumbed to her wounds. We represent her family for her death. So Shurat HaDin immediately launched a project specifically connected to women's rights. There are legal issues in this issue. Number one, we wanted to promote awareness, and I'll show you in a moment a video that we created within 2 weeks of the war starting about where are the women's rights units. We applied to the UN for women, to UN Women for a grant, which is comical. Took them, 3 months to come out with a statement even. And we're filing an ICC complaint that's specific to the war crimes against women during October 7th. And this is the video that was created, that was sent out, and I'll just show it to you. It's just a couple of minutes.
Where are the women's rights organizations? Where is the Me Too movement? Where are you when Israeli women were raped and slaughtered by Hamas terrorists? Where are you while Israeli girls are kept hostages, tortured and sexually abused by subhuman animals? How come you haven't spoken even a word? Is it okay with you to rape Jews? Is that what you're saying? Because we hear you all the time. All but now. Almost 3 weeks since the horrific program occurred, women and children were brutally raped by Hamas streets in military bunkers. Images of bleeding women being paraded through Gaza as captives were broadcast worldwide. And nothing but a war crime. No condemnation. Not a call to release the women and children. Rape has been recognized as an insidious war crime. It is a horrific criminal weapon that tries to serve a political objective. The Geneva Convention specifically provides that
women shall be especially protected against any attack on their honor, in particular against rape or any form of indecent assault.
Why do you believe that this international law you constantly wave in our faces should not apply in this case? Why do you believe that the international tribunals are merely a weapon to punish Israel, but in no way should be used to safeguard Israeli? There is no taking sides in this. This is pure evil. This is inhuman. It's rape. It's a war crime. When you stood for women's rights, you made a change. You exposed, hunted down, shamed, and prosecuted the perpetrators of rape and sexual violence in your countries. But you now choose to sit idly because it involves Jewish girls and women. There is only one word to describe it: anti-Semitic hypocrisy.
That video got hundreds of thousands of views. I know that there are many things that led there, Me Too, unless you're a Jew, and there's a lot of outcry. But we are also working on these issues and doing our best to get those issues out there. But again, focusing on the legal issues, on the crimes that are being committed and the actions that can be taken in order to make sure that women are protected. The International Red Cross, yeah. The International Red Cross is an organization whose job it is to check on and care for the safety of hostages at time of war. That's their job. They do it all the time in terrible situations. By the way, not just in situations where it's two, law-abiding armies fighting each other, because that doesn't really happen anymore. They're constantly doing it when the other side is a terror organization. They do it all the time, and they do it. They go, they see the hostages, they make sure they're taken care of, they don't even know how many of our hostages are alive. They have not seen one of them. They don't bring them their medicine. And by the way, I've heard people say, well, they can't, they don't have access, they don't have contact with the Red Crescent, which is the Red Cross inside Gaza. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. The Red Cross has been betraying the Jewish people since its inception. They betrayed us during the Holocaust, and by the way, if you look at the Red Cross's website, there's an apology. They acknowledge that they left us, that they did not do what they were supposed to do during the Holocaust, and yet they're doing it again. All under the argument that they're doing the best they can, and Israel, by the way, once again, always blaming the victim. Israel was allowed to be a victim for about 6 hours in this war, and now we're the victimizers, like this. We're not allowed to be the victims anymore. So we brought a lawsuit against the Red Cross in Jerusalem, demanding that they follow their duty. They have an actual legal obligation based on their mandate. The best part of the story is that it took them a very long time to find a lawyer who would represent them. The lawsuit was brought on behalf of 24 plaintiffs in Israel who have family members who are hostages, and obviously the case is still going, but a really important action.
Where are they
I'm
women?
going backwards. Just 1 second. Tell you. One of the couples who is clients of ours are Raz and Ohad Ben-Ami. They're plaintiffs in the case against the Red Cross. They were kidnapped from their home and held separately in Gaza. Ohad, 55, remains hostage. Raz, 57, was released after nearly 2 months in captivity. She described being kept in inhumane conditions, and her health deteriorated since she did not receive the medicine that she required that she takes for her chronic illness. While she was in captivity, her family members begged the Red Cross, to please bring her medicine, and they were rejected. Battling the UN agencies. I mentioned before, the UN agencies are a major problem for Israel, for the world, for Jews, for... And I'll tell you the biggest problem is they have 100% complete and total immunity. You can't sue them. I mean, it's the smartest scheme in the history of the world. They can do whatever they want, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we decided we need to do something. UNRWA, as you all know, has been basically proven to be Hamas in Gaza. There's a problem with UNRWA for many, many, many years. I mean, there's never been in the history of the world refugees, third generation. It doesn't exist. Only in Gaza does this exist, or only in Israel, I should say, or in the Middle East. But now Israel has proven that at least 12 of their employees were directly involved. Thousands of their employees are members of Hamas. So what can we do? We, first of all, exposure, bringing to light who they really are, what they're really doing. We brought a lawsuit against the State Department on behalf of 60 victims of Hamas terror, United States citizens, because you have to be a U.S. citizen to sue the State Department, and about 8,000 non-U.S. citizens who have been victims of Hamas who signed on as people of interest, and demanded that the State Department defund fully and completely and permanently UNRWA until either they are completely revamped, because it's an impossibility to say that they could somehow rehabilitate this organization, or until some new organization takes their place. And we're working on a lawsuit for the victims against UNRWA. Now remember, I told you the UN has complete immunity, but we may have a loophole in Israel. So we are working on a lawsuit against UNRWA in Israel. UNHRC, we sent a demand letter for UNHRC, who is supposed to take care of displaced people during times of armed conflict. They are actively helping Gazans, not one penny to 200,000 Israelis who have been displaced because of this war. So we sent a legal demand letter demanding that they provide aid. They haven't, and they know that there's really not much we can do about it, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't still fight the fight. UNICEF is the UN organization who's tasked with taking care of children during times of armed conflict. UNICEF also, not one moment of help for the orphans that were left because of the terror attacks, for the children who have been displaced from their homes. Some of them still, to this day, we have almost 100,000 people still displaced from their homes. So we did this little experiment. Again, exposure is critical, and we got some of our lawyers from Legal War Room to make some phone calls to UNICEF. Look at what happened.
UNICEF UK. My name's Luca. Please be aware all calls are recorded.
I'm anxious to give some money. Presumably you have a fund for this terrible Middle Eastern war.
Yes, so there is a Children of Gaza appeal.
I want to earmark my money specifically for the children in Israel. So can I just be clear that my money will go to the children in Israel?
Okay, let's see what we've got in here. So we've got a Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, obviously the Gaza, Libya, flood appeal. There's not an Israel. I mean, obviously Gaza is like is in Israel.
Sorry,
so,
Gaza's in Israel.
Well, yeah, it belongs to Israel. Yeah.
I'm not going to Gaza unless you're able to very specifically tell me that my money will go to help some of the Israeli children. Are you able to give that specific confirmation?
Gaza does belong to Israel.
No, it doesn't. You're really telling me that unless it comes under the heading of Gaza, there's nothing?
No, so that's the main appeal there.
I just looked up now, like it's over, I think, 130,000 displaced Israelis.
I can send you some links, what are we doing in Israel and how we can, helping them around the world.
Yeah, I would actually now, after talking to you and hearing that they're not being helped as much, like all of the money, all of my $1,000 to be guaranteed to go to Israeli children.
Right now, the deal which I'm working on is actually towards Gaza.
I'm interested in donating to UNICEF.
Sure, I can help with that.
So I would love to help children, displaced persons that are part of this conflict going on in Israel.
We don't have a campaign for Israeli victims at the moment. We have an active fund for the children of Gaza at the moment.
I'm curious to know why there's a program in place for Hamas victims, but there's not a program in place for victims of the terrorism that occurred on October 7th.
We have an active fund in the region of Gaza for children there and for victims.
Okay, because it's interesting because that you're
calling.
We couldn't have scripted that. I mean, and those were their real answers. Anyway, so that video got hundreds of thousands of views. Again, does it necessarily make a change? No, but we have to keep fighting. We have to do everything we can to expose the bias and the problem, this very real problem we have with any UN agency and the connection to Israel. We've brought war crimes complaints in the International Criminal Court. I mentioned this already, both in terms of war crimes that happened on October 7th and beyond, and then one specific to war crimes against women. College campus actions, I'll just touch on very briefly. Shurat HaDin, I will tell you, it does not often get involved in these issues because it's very much a domestic, we're more international. But we understood after October 7th that actually the terrorism that infiltrated Israel is just the same terrorism that you're feeling now on your college campuses here in Israel and in many, many places. And we understood that we do have a certain expertise, and at the end of the day, this is all still terrorism. What's happening on your college campuses is not free speech. It's not harmless academic freedom of education. It's terrorism. And the students on your campuses are calling for action against Israel, death to America, by the way, also. They're not discriminating. And when Israel says we're the front line of this war and you're next, this is real. I mean, you're hearing it here on your own campuses. So we sent college campus letters, but not to the presidents, to the general councils of each of the major universities with a Jewish student population, and told them what their legal obligations are to their students and what would happen if they don't follow those legal obligations. I filed a lawsuit against Harvard on behalf of 10 Harvard alumni for diminishment of the value of their diplomas. They have a contract. When you go to college, you are going to a specific college for a specific reason. You go to Harvard, you pay a lot of money because you want to be able to say you're a Harvard grad. And now, guess what? Harvard grads are embarrassed to say that they're Harvard grads. Stay tuned for what happens with that case. And we're working on a lawsuit against Students for Justice in Palestine. It's a difficult one, again, very long, separate discussion, but just know we are working on it. And I'm very hopeful that we will be able to find a way to file a lawsuit very soon. So, how can you help? What can you do? What can we all do? And I'll tell you that there's two major things I would say. One is selfish, support Shurat HaDin. We need your help. You will join the battle. You will join the fight. You will join a new, very creative way to be part of this, to actually be a soldier on the front lines for Israel using the law. And the second thing you can do is fight everywhere you possibly can, every way you possibly can, to remove the pressure from Israel from going after Hamas and destroying them and getting our hostages back. It's absolutely ridiculous that anyone in this world would demand from Israel to stop anything until we have our hostages back. And the leadership who perpetrated the most horrific massacre since the Holocaust are not stopped permanently. And I just urge you, encourage you, don't ever let that go. Don't ever let anyone say ever again, well, there's too many people being killed. Israel's going to have to stop. Resist that. This is a war. Israel is doing more than any army in the history of the world to protect civilians. By the way, at the significant risk of our own children, our soldiers are dying to save innocent Gazans. So continue putting pressure, continue fighting, and continue fighting also the terrorism and the anti-Semitism that you're seeing in your own streets and in your own communities. And as Jonathan mentioned, I just want to let you know, we have this mission coming up May 27th. Please, anybody who's interested or knows anyone who might be interested in coming and bearing witness in Israel, but doing it at a level that's completely different than any other mission that's going on right now, please, I encourage you, reach out. In the pamphlets that you have our email. It's actually info@Israel Law Center, but feel free to email me directly, Rachel@Israel Law Center. We have a seminar coming up this summer. Any of you who are lawyers or law enforcement or security personnel and you're interested specifically in the legal issues that arose after October 7th, we have a seminar that's going to be the week of June 30th. We're going to do some bearing witness, but everything is going to be very focused on the legal issues surrounding what happened. You'll get all your CLEs for 2 years if you are interested. So please, if that's something that could be of interest to you or anyone you know, please share. And we also have a law student internship program. The program for the summer is full, but we will run it every winter and every summer. And actually, we have someone in this room who knows someone who attended our internship. It's really incredible, and these students go back to their college campuses with the knowledge and the power and the passion to fight for Israel, and often the law students are the leadership of these college campuses and are able to really do a lot and effectuate change. So I want to thank everybody again so much for coming, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, there are a couple of microphones, so we'll ask you to raise your hand and hold on to the microphone until you're called. And just one rule of the road here, since we're all getting legal now, keep it short. Just ask the question. Try not to tell your story. Just ask this wonderful speaker what her story and views are. Bart.
You've won several cases. Have you collected any money?
Good question. We have won about $3 billion in judgments. Now, that's a different question than what you just asked me. I will answer. We've collected about $300 million. So it's pennies on the dollar, but it's still a lot of money. And the judgments themselves have power. I can tell you, for example, the Palestinian Authority used to have bank accounts in New York. They don't anymore, because we were able to close and seize those accounts. So the judgment itself can have an effect and can have a power and can have a deterrent effect. But I'll tell you something, the money, while it's absolutely critical and we need to shut down the money, it's $1 billion industry, billions. We've all seen it, by the way, and most of the money goes into the pockets of the leaders, as we've seen, or into building terror tunnels. But there's also a power to giving the victims a voice. You have no idea. I've worked with hundreds of terror victims in my time at Shurat HaDin. I've been there since 2012. And every single one of them tells me the same thing, that bringing these cases makes them feel like less of a victim, makes them feel powerful, makes them make sure that the memory of their loved one continues on, and there's a real importance to that as well.
Yeah, hi, Rachel, thank you so much. I'm barely awake. I was in Jerusalem yesterday, Gush Etzion, all over the country, and these missions, whenever you can go, please go to Israel. The reception was so warm and so courageous. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. But I was interviewed by Israeli TV, and I also had a couple of very interesting conversations with people, foreign ministry, and it's being discussed in Israel. And they said to me, when you're going to go back to the United States, this is pretty high up, you're going to start hearing political leaders accusing Israel of genocide, which happened 2 days ago and today, a prominent United States senator. And they said what they're aiming to do is threaten the war cabinet of Israel with war crimes, take them to court. And you're going to be very busy because I think that is being used as a political weapon right now. I want to get your comments about that. What do we do with that?
We fight. We fight. We bring war crimes complaints against the real war criminals, for one. And for two, we do everything we can. Listen, ask Jonathan. He has a client accused of a crime he didn't commit. By the way, I worked in criminal defense for the first part of my career, and I had so many people say, how do you defend a client who's guilty? And my response was always, it's much harder to defend a client who's innocent. And I will tell you that our soldiers are 100% innocent. The good news is there's a lot of really good, really smart people who are there for them. But at the end of the day, again, it's fighting back against the falsehoods. That's what's the most important thing. And I did see, while we're seeing these unbelievable accusations of genocide, which is crazy, it's just so crazy. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense, right? It's completely backwards. Who are the genocidal murderers in this story? Not Israel. But we are seeing, and I try to really focus on leadership in the United States. Just today I read, and I can't remember which head of government it was, who said Israel is not committing genocide, committing suicide, God forbid. So we just have to keep forcing that. We just have to keep fighting that. It's just not true.
I hate to put you on the spot, Rachel, but you mentioned the Martyrs Fund and the funding from the United States, that it happened, it stopped, and it's happening again. Do you care to put dates on when it started, it stopped, and happened again?
No. We know that the fund has been going on. I don't know what year it's, you know what? I can answer that question after. I'll get you the answer. I'll send it, and it can be distributed.
It was a political question, which I didn't want to put you on.
But I will tell you that it stopped. Listen, I'm going to say, I hate politics, by the way, in general. But the funding did stop under Republican leadership, and it started again under Democrat leadership. And that's not a judgment on either. I'm not getting involved in politics. I'm just telling you that that's the timeline.
Politics is quicksand.
Yeah.
One quick comment for this audience. I discussed this with Rachel before she started. The Los Angeles Jewish community has heavily endorsed her work, and they put their money where their mouth is. I'd like to see it happen in Florida, too.
Thank you.
Hi. Have you started to get involved in this World Central Kitchen business? And is there a way that you can fight it, because it's obviously getting worse and worse, and Jose Andres just won't keep his mouth shut now, totally anti-Israel?
Yeah, look, here's the reality. There's not much we can do. It sickens me because, listen, it was a mistake. I spoke to people on the inside. As I've mentioned before, we do have access to people in places that most people don't. And at the end of the day, it was a mistake. It was a terrible mistake. And Israel is not only the most moral army in the world, but we are the most transparent army in the world, to a fault. What army in the world shares the details of a mistake, of issues that happen? Nobody. At the end of the day, we have to remember that our soldiers are in an absolutely impossible situation. I actually have very close friends who, both of their boys are in Sayeret Golani, in the Special Forces of Golani. And I had one of them at my Friday night dinner table a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that the terrorists play audio tapes of babies crying, of people speaking Hebrew, claiming to be our hostages. And it sounds like them, and by the way, it might be them on tape. And they are pulled into ambushes and killed. So what happens is a terrible thing, but if you watch the story's progression, it started with a terrorist on top of the World Kitchen car. And then when they came to the hangar, they were surrounded by terrorists, and then they believed that terrorists had actually infiltrated the cars. Again, it was a terrible mistake, but nobody pays attention to what Israel is doing, all the good that we're doing. I'll give you one statistic, just to give you an idea. The average in the world in combat for enemy combatant versus innocent civilian being killed during times of armed combat is 9-to-1. 9 innocent civilians for 1 enemy combatant. Israel now, again, who knows if the numbers are right, okay? They say 30,000 people have been killed in Gaza. It all comes from Hamas. Who knows if it's real? If anybody read the article by the Wharton professor who said it's complete impossibility. Their numbers are absolutely impossible. But let's even say they're right. Israel says at least 10 to 15,000 of them are terrorists. We know they're terrorists. Our statistic is 2-to-1. 9-to-1 versus 2-to-1. It's impossible. The Urban Warfare College in the United States has issued reports saying that Israel is accomplishing acts in terms of protecting civilian lives that no other army in the history of the world has done. It's actually impossible what they're doing. So again, what can we do about it? I'm not sure there's much we can do, except to just counter with the facts. It was a mistake. Israel, did everything it could. It apologized, but what we're doing on a daily basis is impossible.
So, Rachel, I have a question, and we can continue the discussion, but we know that Hamas has been funding on university campuses for 20 years. But we now know that the Qatar Foundation, which does fund directly to Hamas, the Qatar Foundation is made up by the rulers of Hamas, the royal family. They are funding the New York City Department of Education. It is absolute fact. They've given over $1.5 million to date. As a result, the curriculum in the New York City public schools in 7th grade has changed, but even worse, we have preschool and kindergarten teachers in the New York City Department of Education that have obliterated Israel on the map, that have preached anti-Semitism, caricatures of Jews on their doors in their public school building. I know the schools. What am I doing? What are we doing, the legal community in New York? So we're filing a bunch of OCR complaints. And I will tell you, it means nothing. OCR is the Office of Civil Rights, and any public entity, any entity that receives any federal funding has to comply with the Office of Civil Rights, and because we have the new, all right. It's not accomplishing. 300% increase in the number of OCR complaints since October 7th, brought on behalf of Jewish teachers and students who have been experiencing terrible anti-Semitism in New York City. But what it does, we make noise. And we are here, and we are a force to reckon with. Whether or not we're going to be able to stop it, I don't know. But I do know that the most dangerous thing in the world is to do nothing. So we have to make noise, but you have to teach us. You have to tell us how to make the noise. We are retirees, many of us. How do we make that noise? How do we do it? One, I just want to make a pitch. We have to just go to Israel. I'm not afraid. Maybe I'd be a little afraid if my 5-year-old grandson was there with me, but I'm not afraid. What's going to happen to me? And for a soldier to thank me for coming to Israel, I was embarrassed. He said, "You're thanking me for sitting in a cafe and having a cappuccino and giving you a hug and a kiss?" But what can we do to fight it here in kindergarten?
Just as you said, Regina, just don't give up. Keep fighting. Keep filing lawsuits. I can tell you that it is actually really, really terrifying. We represent a group of psychologists. The American Psychological Association is made up of tens of thousands of members. The ability to change the way the world sees things is through education and through therapy. I don't know what the percentage is, but I bet you there's a very high percentage of Americans who are in some sort of therapy. And I will just tell you that it's infiltrating there too. And it's affecting how they treat their patients. So, listen, we're going to bring a lawsuit against the APA, and all I'm going to say is just keep fighting. Really, just don't give up. This is your home. What is it going to look like in 20 years for your children and for your grandchildren and for your great-grandchildren, wherever you are in life? I mean, it's terrifying.
So, since the United States started refunding the Palestinian Authority, how are they channeling the money? And isn't there a way of stopping that?
Look, here's the problem. Money is fungible. So if the Palestinian Authority tells the United States government that the money that you're giving us, we're only spending on education, which is problematic, by the way, but on utilities, on roads, on public works, whatever it is, well, that just frees up another $20 million to go towards the Pay for Slave Fund. So they can't get funding until they stop this program. It's quite simple, but it's not being followed, and it's not being followed because of the pressure that's going on, and this pressure started 20 years ago. So we're now in, 1939 Germany, and we have a really critical task. We have to turn this around, and it can't be just by the Jewish community. We have to build relationships outside of the Jewish community, and we have to make sure that the world understands what's really happening. And again, it feels insurmountable, but we can't give up. We can't give up. This is literally the survival of the state of Israel and the Jewish people right now in our time, in our lifetime.
First, thank you very much for everything you are doing in your organization. I just don't have words to express my gratitude. I have a question regarding public relations. Israel is losing the public relations war. And like everybody else here on Twitter and Facebook and other places, I'm following a lot of commentators, and I certainly hope I'm not living in an echo chamber with other Israelis. And I'm wondering who is doing your PR for your organization. Do you have an Elon Levy, or do you have somebody to speak for your organization?
We do have PR people. It's not our focus. There are other organizations that are really Hasbara organizations. And Shurat HaDin, at the end of the day, you have to have a mission and a mandate, and you have to focus on that. So Hasbara is not our mission and mandate. It's fighting back using the law. But we do have media people, and I will tell you, Israel isn't going to win the media war because the numbers just don't work. I mean, there's billions and a couple million, right? So it's a problem. But I will say that I think Israel is actually doing the best it's ever done in terms of releasing good media. We have a spokesperson's unit that now is very active in the IDF. And I just encourage you to follow that and share that everywhere you can, because they're releasing the truth. They're releasing real information, actual facts, and counter arguments to all the things that you're hearing. It's there. There's really good information there. You just have to find it and share it.
We have one last comment and then a couple of announcements.
Very concretely, where do we go and find that? I mean, I would very much like to say, here's a source that I can be 100% it's 100% reliable, that it's not biased, it's not coming from a left or a right perspective, but this is what's happening on the ground. It's very hard to look at current events, never mind history, without blinders.
Look, is there some neutral organization that's sharing information? No. There is no neutral organization on Israel. You either hate us or you love us. It's kind of how it goes. But the IDF spokesperson's unit is what I would recommend that you, yes, I would recommend that you really, they're releasing every day really important, critical video and facts and the real information. It's I mean, of course, if you're talking to the people who are on extreme, who just hate us, they're not going to listen, right? They're not going to believe, and they're going to say it's a lie. But there's a lot of people in the middle, a lot. And try to get them, try to explain to them what's really happening and use these facts to try to help them understand the truth.
Just want to make two announcements. One, there is a program you all know that's matching gifts. I don't know if Shurat HaDin is on that list because it's an international organization, but if it isn't, just go to the website tomorrow. You'll see it written up in the Herald Tribune today and tomorrow, also online. If you don't locate this particular organization, I would suggest we just ask you to make a contribution to the Adult Education Fund here or to Jewish Federation earmarked for Shurat HaDin so we could forward the funds to them. I appreciate your consideration, of course. Okay, you have the envelopes too? Okay, even better. If you wish, just bring the envelopes up here if you choose to give tonight, and we'll forward it properly. The other thing is we have refreshments for you, so you can continue your conversations together and with our speaker. Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah, it's in the hallway if you'd like to go there.